Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the best-selling author, award-winning international speaker, industry-leading salesperson, and a remarkable survivor, Christine Clifford.
I want to start by asking a question. How many of you are willing to admit that you've ever laughed so hard that you've cried? Well, most of you are willing to admit that, right? Well, now I want to know, how many of you are willing to admit that you have ever laughed so hard that you've actually wet your pants? Is anybody willing to admit that? Because if you're sitting next to somebody who just raised their hand, I suggest you might want to move. Because hopefully we're going to have some wonderful laughs together this afternoon. And you know what I've learned going through my cancer experience, as many of you have as well, is that cancer is a very difficult subject for most people to discuss. In fact, when my mother went through her cancer experience, and it would have been well over 35 years ago now, the children in our family weren't even allowed to say the word cancer. We had to refer to it as the C word, or my mother's illness. And you know what makes it even more of a challenge is when you have breast cancer. I mean, let's face it, it's not one of those body parts we use in our everyday vocabulary. It isn't like head or arm or leg. And you know what I find so ironic about my entire situation is that all of my life there's been a focus on my breasts. Now this actually started when I was a young girl back in high school. I had kind of one of those strange little bodies. I had a size 18-inch waist and wore a 36C bra. I was the envy of all my girlfriends and the taunts of all the young boys. And I don't know how many of you can remember back to those high school days, but we used to all have nicknames for each other. Now the tallest girl in my class was called Stick. The skinniest was Bones. The one with the red hair, Carrot Top. Well, my nickname, this is actually in my high school yearbook for all of my posterity to see, was Melons. Oh yes, good old Mel. And I actually grew up in Southern California, and I was a cheerleader in high school, and I cheered for a team called the San Marino Titans. And I used to get up there on the football field on Friday night all anxious to cheer my team on to victory. And I'd start out with this yell, and I'd go, T-I-T. And I would get about that far, and all the boys in the audience would start yelling and screaming and whistling and throwing their hats up in the air. And no matter what I did, I could never ever get through the A-N-S, Titans yama yama. I get asked questions like, Christine, did it hurt? How does it look? Do you still have it? I knew I had truly become a singular sensation when 3 days after I got home from the hospital, my youngest son at the time, Brooks, answered our doorbell and yelled up to me, Mom, more flowers for your breast. And while I had no hair, the famous supermodel of my era, Cindy Crawford, came out with her Book of Beauty. Now, I don't know how many of you might have bought Cindy's book 13 years ago, but I figured anyone who didn't have any hair could use all the help she could get. So I bought Cindy's book, and I was reading through it, and Cindy talk about how even one tiny little eyebrow out of place can make such a difference. You know, I figured if she'd just give it to me, I'd plant it on my head. Well, then, of course, all my well-meaning friends kept saying things to me like, Christine, don't worry about it. When your hair comes back, it's going to grow in thicker and curlier and more beautiful than ever. Well, I don't know about any of you who've been through this experience, but when my hair was growing back, I looked something like a cross between Andy Warhol and Lyle Lovett.